Wow.
Well, he was enraged, you know.
No, I do understand. But then a curious reaction set in. The alien was down, apparently dead. Very, very dead. Bleeding seriously and profusely from the skull, as in the photographs we can see. At this point, you went into kind of a state of shock, I think, and you thought you might have just committed murder, killed.
Well, I didn't know what had happened. At first I thought maybe I had killed a child that was dressed up and my dog had attacked it. Dogs do things like that for, you know, unknown people who get, you know, for one other reason.
What a horrible moment. That must have been a horrible moment.
It was terrible. I was emotionally in shock. I was going through terrible stress. I was in fear of what I may have done. My mind was clearly not working right. I was sick. I went through nausea. I had a terrible headache. I didn't know what I had done, except I knew my dog was gone, and I had created this act, which I didn't know if it was murder. I didn't know if it was self-defense. I wasn't sure.
At that point, did you reach down and ever touch this creature, trying to determine if it was a costume with a child underneath, or what did you do?
Well, I think I probably stood there, and also I got very sick, very violently sick to my stomach, within 2 or 3 feet of this. So I was close enough to see what I was looking at. I could see that this was not a costume or a mask.
Is that what made you sick?
Well, I think the whole event was so emotional.
All right.
And the loss of my dog. I had had this dog for 5 years.
Trust me, I know. I lost one the same way. Well, not the same way, but I lost one. Doctor, hold on. Dr. Jonathan Reed is here. He's the one you're listening to, along with Robert Wraith, who is documenting all of this. And there is a lot of documentation for it, beginning with the photographs on my website right now at www.artbell.com. Rescan, higher res, go take a look. And in a moment, I've got some audio from the videotape, and you're about to hear it. Robert Wraith and Dr. Jonathan Reed are here with one of the more incredible stories you're ever going to hear. Thing is, unlike so many others, this story we have documented with photographic evidence and videotape evidence. You're going to hear a shortened version of the rest of the story, and in a moment you're going to hear Dr. Reed in the woods. He was running. Boy, was he running. Anyway, we'll get to that in just a moment. Once again, Robert Wraith and the man who had the experience, Dr. Jonathan Reed. Dr. Reed, are you there?
Yes.
And Robert?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to play a short audio tape with your permission, which I took earlier today from the videotape that I have that has not yet been made public. And I do this with your permission, correct?
Yes, you do.
All right. Let us then confirm that this is, in fact, part of the audio from that tape. Listen carefully, folks. You're going to hear a man in a dead, flat panic. Listen.
Focus.
That should give you some idea. Doctor, that was you?
Yes, it was.
That should give everybody some idea of the kind of... You were hyperventilating. At one point, obviously, you threw up. Can you pinpoint what was going on during what we just heard?
Yes, this was at the end of about 2.5 hours. What I felt was 2.5 hours of time from the point where I encountered the alien until I decided that I was either going to go out of my mind or be so sick that I would never make it back to my car and or to civilization. So I decided, I don't know if I was obviously very rational, decided to take my cameras out and photograph everything that I could see.
And by the way, you had the cameras with you. People asked about that.
Yeah, I often took my cameras with me. We have a lot of wildlife and beautiful country. And I had a 35 millimeter camera and a 8 millimeter video camera.
In a backpack?
Yes.
And you also had this thermal blanket.
Yeah, I had a typical Mylar thermal blanket, which you use in case of emergency. I had some day rations, some food, flashlight, a pocket knife. That was about it.
You were on that scene for a total of 3 hours.
I think it was just under 3 hours.
Just under 3 hours. During that period of time, you eventually noticed something hovering in the air nearby.
About an hour after my dog had found the being, I had been sick. I had been practically out of my mind, not knowing what to do. Almost couldn't stand at times, and then regained a little bit of composure. And it seemed for a long time like everything had stopped, like the air had gone dead. And for some reason, all of a sudden, I felt like I could hear a sound. And I thought, maybe it's another camper, or maybe it's another hiker. And I thought, maybe I can get some help, because I needed help. And I kind of ran up the path about 30 feet, and I listened, and I couldn't hear anything, but I almost could feel a humming type of sound, almost like when you feel static electricity against the hair on your arm or the back of your neck.
Sure.
And I tried to listen close enough to where it was coming from, but I couldn't determine where it was coming from. It was so subtle. And I ran the other way down, back toward where I had dropped my backpack, maybe another 60, 70 feet. And I couldn't hear it at that point. And I thought, well, it's gone. Maybe they're moving away from me, or, maybe it was in my mind. And all of a sudden, I turned around, and through the brush, probably some 150 feet from where I was standing, I could see the outline of a black shape. And at first, I thought, well, what is that? Is it a tent? Is it, I didn't know what I was looking at.
When I first got the photographs, Doctor, I thought it was a ship. And obviously the vehicle, the creature landed in. But as you look at the foliage attendant there, you get a scale, and it didn't look big enough to bring that creature, small as it was. It might have, but it didn't look like that.
I don't think it was a ship as we think of these things. I think it was something else. It was, in its dimension, it was approximately 9 feet long, about 2.5, 2 3/4 feet high, and about 3.5 to 4 feet wide. It had 6 sides, 6 definite dimensional triangles. It was made of some type of material that felt like granite or some kind of stone that was shiny, and it looked like almost a pool of water, the surface, with some kind of fiber in amongst, this depth. But as I saw it, I moved closer to it, and I got within 30 feet of it, and then I went into almost hysterics, not knowing, again, what is this? What is going on here? And again, I got violently ill and almost couldn't stand and just literally laid against a tree, breathing and trying to gain some kind of composure.
All right. You obviously eventually you got to the point where you got enough composure to wrap this creature up in this blanket you had brought.
What I thought, the way my mind was working, was that nobody will believe this, and if there's anything I can do to preserve the body, so I can bring somebody back to help me and maybe save it, so I can show somebody that that's what I tried to do. At first, I thought about burying it. I thought about, trying to put it up in a tree. I thought about, digging a hole and covering it up, probably halfway, because I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to deal with it, and halfway because I wanted to preserve it. So I ended up saying, well, if I take this thermal blanket and put rocks around it, on top of it, then I could somehow preserve this. Maybe if I put branches on top of it, animals wouldn't come and bother it. There were a lot of animals in the area. I couldn't find any rocks that would work. They were all too big. This is a very mountainous area. They were connected, to the ground. And I didn't have a shovel. I had a knife. That's all I had as far as tools go. And I thought, well, maybe if I wrap it up and roll this thing up in this thermal blanket, I can, put it against, the hillside and pile branches or something alongside of it. So I decided to roll the creature into the blanket, and that was the first time I touched it, and roll it up like a bedroll or like a burrito, which we ended up calling it, and basically put it somewhere where I could come back to it later. Well, while I was moving it, I realized it was extremely light. The total weight was probably, 52, 55 pounds. And I looked for a place to put it. I looked for branches. I really couldn't find anything, so I thought, okay, I'll drag it back down the trail. And I basically carried this thing and looked for a place to hide it. And pretty soon I realized I had walked all the way back to my car.
So here you were at your car with this wrapped-up creature.
Right.
You did what? Threw it in the back of the car?
I threw it in the back of the car, got in the car, and sat there for about probably 10 or 15 minutes without doing anything. It was just kind of like coming back to reality for a moment.